Well, welcome back. What we have here, it says 15-minute lecture and a 30-minute practice. The practice is 30 minutes. I'm not so sure the lecture is 15. It may be closer to 10, all right. And so as we look at system configuration, what we're looking for in this particular lesson, and once again, it probably is really misnamed. We're going to take a look at how to manipulate date and time. We're going to first configure the old NTP. I think I talked about that earlier. And we're going to then configure cron, which is a systemd replacement for NTP. And admittedly, there's been some times with NTP where some vulnerabilities have been shown. And so one of the things that cron is trying to do is close that vulnerability. So let's start with a slide that you've seen before. This is the one that we use to configure date and time, picking a time zone, a region. And once again, while we have got the Americas through New York, we refer to this as the Eastern time zone, all right, which I find real strange when we get down to South America, and it's on the western side of South America. I do find interesting in a discussion about time zones that the great state of Maine in the Northeast is looking at moving from the Eastern time zone to the Atlantic time zone. And that's really because Newfoundland, which is just immediately next to Maine, Maine has more to do with Newfoundland than it does with the United States. All right. And so that was kind of a neat idea. I thought, well, yeah, that might work. Okay. So this is the date and time GUI. It does have this done screen up in the upper left-hand corner. Remember the done screens that we had from doing the install? The new command, time date CTL. It's part of systemd. And so it can bring us local universal, real-time clock, time zone, NTP configuration, and then if your country, if your state, your province goes with daylight savings time, that is also configurable. All right. And so time date CTL is the command. And then there is a set time parameter. Now, we have two different formats for set time. One that allows me to set the date, and another one that allows me to set the time. And so, once again, in a classroom of students, I get a hand up that says, well, Al, is there a set date command? No. There's only a set time with two different formats. There is a set time zone, so that if you wanted to change the time zone, you could. And then there is a set NTP that allows you to enable synchronization. Inside of Oracle, there are some environments where time is very, very sensitive. We have a database configuration called Real Application Clusters. It goes by the three-letter acronym RAC. And literally, if the node time is not synchronized, and it's out by as little as 15 seconds, you can get a node eviction. And so once again, you need some sort of cesium atom clock that you can connect to get an accurate time. All right. Now, the cesium atom clock runs on Universal Coordinated Time, UTC, which is now the politically correct name for what I think at one time was Greenwich Mean. Okay. And then, based upon the time zone that you have set, there can be local adjustments made in your server. And so maybe the server time is UTC, okay? And then you do whatever localization that you need to do based upon where your people are located. Because I would suspect that they're not all in the same time zone. Just probably not. We did systemctl a little earlier. And so we have a start NTPD, the Network Time Protocol daemon. And if you want this process to restart on reboot, then you'd also have to use an enable command. All right. There is an NTPQ command, and it will be used, NTPQ-P, to print out information. And so conceptually, we're going to take DOM0, and it's going to be an NTP server, and we'll take one of the other DOMUs, one of the unprivileged domains, and we'll make it an NTP client. Now, we'll run the NTPQ-P on DOM0. You'll get results back immediately. However, when you get over to the client, you'll run the NTPQ-P command, and you're going to say, well, Al, the numbers are all screwy. In the practice, it tells you it could take a while. And I would tell you that that's 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes. But once it gets synchronized, then the output that you see in the practice, in the activities guide, will be very similar to the output that you receive. And then there is obviously an NTP stat command to view the network time synchronization status. Now, new with systemd is something called cronny. And somebody asked me, was that the way you'd pronounce it? And the answer is, when you look at tools like cron, C-R-O-N, they're really derived from chronos, all right? Greek word for time. And so maybe it's crony, okay, instead of cronny. They don't give me a pronunciation guide that necessarily goes with this. Once again, it's an effort to maybe close some of the loopholes that have been exploited in NTP. It's designed for systems that are often powered down or disconnected from the network. The main configuration file is etc.chrony.conf, and the parameters in that file are essentially, it says very similar, essentially the same thing that you'd have in the etc ntp.conf file. There's a daemon, so I've got cronyd as opposed to ntpd. There's a cronc, which is a command line tool, and we have tracking and sources, so that you can at the command line bring that information up. And down here at the very bottom, there is a lot of cronny.tuxfamily.org manual. Okay? And so once again, anything that you're looking to do with time, except probably reverse it, is available in the documentation. Okay. Now, I think I told you this is a quick lecture. All right. The lab will go pretty quickly as well. Okay. We have a quiz. Which of the following are Oracle Linux 7 command line utilities that may not have been talked about during the lecture to configure system date and time? Select all that apply. Let me give you just a moment to look over these 5 answers. Obviously, it's a trick question. Did you get letter C? Or did you get date, hardware clock, and letter C? A, B, C, D, A, B, C. All right. And so while the answer is C, because that's what we talked about, date and hardware clock are still available. And so if you have been experienced with Linux 6, then you may already be familiar with those 2 command line tools. So we're going to use time, date, CTL. We will first configure NTP. You'll bring down NTP on the client, and you'll configure chrony on the client. Or I guess that's chrony, C-H-R-O-N-Y, chrony. Okay. Let's go into the practice. We'll be back here shortly for lesson number 6. All right, these are the practices for lesson 5, system configuration. The overview is that we will work with date and time. We'll enable NTP on DOM 0 and host 02. We'll enable chrony on host 02, which is a replacement for NTP as we covered in the lecture. And we'll modify system configuration files, view and modify kernel settings, and view hardware device and device driver attributes. Pretty fun lab, pretty quick, okay? So practice 5.1, using the time date CTL to configure date and time. We'll use a command line tool called time date CTL. The assumptions are you're the root user and you're on host 02. So let's clear this. So I'm root, I'm on DOM 0. And host 02 is up and running, okay? Here on host 02, root's home directory, and it's host 02, and obviously we're up and running. So the first is just time date CTL. And that kind of looks like, once again, the output that was in the PDF. And you notice that we have daylight savings time enabled. All right. Local time here shows to be 2017 to 17, 2300 hours. Well, no, that's not exactly right. Okay. But it does show that it's the 18th based upon using a Universal Coordinated Time, UTC. All right. So if I wanted to go back to the PDF, we could set a new date by using this format, and that'll echo out the change. And we could also do a set time to echo out the change. So time date, TTL, set time, 2017, 02, 18. And now notice that we have the dates in line as they should be. All right. The next part would be to put the date back. Well, no, I'm not going to do that. Why? Because I just corrected it. But let's correct the time. All right. I'm in the central time zone, and it's about 8 a.m. And so it says it's Mountain Standard. Well, I need to go change that. That's another. Well, tell you what. That makes it right. Okay, for Mountain Time. Okay. All right. And so that has us. Now, I do get a question. All right. The question is, Al, the only commands you did were a set time command. Is there not a set date? And the answer is no, there's not. All right, there's just not. Sorry. All right. So NTP, Network Time Protocol. We'll need to install some packages. All right. The practice will take place on Dome 0 and Host 02. Obviously, I was on Dome 0 just a little earlier. All right. And in this particular lab, we now get to see which commands go on which machine. Okay. So let's clear here. We're finished with that exercise. NTP is stopped, which is what we expected. And so grep server etc ntp.conf. All right. Now I'm going to do something to help this out. The Dome U's are configured different than Dome 0. All right. And so there we go. It makes it a lot more readable. All right. And so what I've done to the grep command is I've added color. And once again, I think I showed you the aliases in one of the previous practices where this was true on the Dome U's. And so you can either add it at the command line or you can create an alias. But what it does, it gives us better emphasis in looking for that word server. All right, notice in addition to the public servers, the server is also configured for local clock. And this is the last item here, 127.127.11, 127.127.10. Yeah, 10, not 11. We now want to grep for a drift file. All right. And it is var lib ntp drift. Okay. And once again, if you recall from the lecture, if you were to speed up the oscillation crystal on the hardware clock, then the system clock and the hardware clock can get out of sync. And so we need to have this drift file. All right. So they have a file, but it's just not been created yet. Okay. And that exactly matches what's here, no such file. All right. And so on DOM 0, we want to touch that file to create it. And then we want to change ownership. I'll tell you what, let me just show you that to you. All right. And so that red word there, chown, that's an omission in the lab. And you'll need to make that correction, please. So let's bring that ls up. Touch. Clear. And so that command, touch, created it, but it's owned by root. That's not good. All right. And so what we want to do, chown ntp, ntp. And now instead of being owned by root, it's owned by the network time protocol owner, all right, which is the right way to have that file set up. And so let me go back to the practice for just a moment. You need to write down that command in red. It is not in your book, and the service that you're about to start, it can't write to that file if it's not owned by NTP. So it stopped. We'll start it. And it's now up and running. Okay. Now, all of that would have occurred anyway, even if you hadn't done the chown, but it wouldn't have had any results. And then certainly, as we get down to this ntpq command, all right, you wouldn't get out information because it couldn't record it in the file. So we have an ntpq-p and an ntp stat. So ntpq-p, and that kind of looks like our results. That's good. NTP stat. Time server is restarting, polling every 64 seconds. Okay. That's a little different than what's in your book. Here, time corrected within 11 milliseconds. Synchronized local stratum, 11. And then polling accuracy here is 1,024 seconds. So we're now going to do the rest of this stuff on host 02. All right, so let me scroll that up to the top. And we're going to take the etc ntp.conf file and we're going to copy it as save. Okay. And then we'll actually go in and edit it to make some changes. So, no, I'm going to leave that there. let's go here. And once again, we've already confirmed that we're there, so cp etc. And you could call it save, you could call it BAK, you could call it whatever you want to call it. All right. And so this is the NTP file. And so we want to change the original line as shown, where we had a comment in front of the word restrict. And so we're going to remove the comment sign. All right, so there's the restrict. That's not the line that I want. Let's search again. There's another. There's the one I want. Okay. And so I want to take and delete that comment line from in front of it. And so it looks like that. That's good. And we want to take the rel NTP servers and put a comment in front of them. Okay, let's escape out of that. And then we want to add a server line to designate that we want to use Dome 0, okay, as the remote clock synchronization server is shown. So we will open a line below. And so that is 192.0.2.1, okay. No, I didn't edit that line for the restrict, so it needs to be 192.0.2.0. All right. There we go. That's better. All right. And so what we have now is to restrict the 192.0.2.0, and we're going to make 192.0.2.1 the server that we're using. All right. And so we've made those changes. All right, so let's escape :WQ. We then want to do a grep And so once again, it has a drift file. And the notion is there is no drift file. So does not exist. So we're going to need to create it, and we're going to need to chown it. Once again, it's owned by root, so we're going to have to make that to where it can be used by NTP. And once again, notice that that's one of those corrections in red. And so once again, you need to write this down here for this location. I'll give you, and once again, it's the exact same command. All right. Oh, look at that. I called it the wrong thing. Darn. Okay. Hold on here. There we go. All right, I put Humpty Dumpty back together again. Sorry for that. So we're going to need to stop the firewall. We're going to want to start that NTP service. NTP is stopped, as we would expect. Oh, not NTP, NTPD. There we go. And that is up and running. NTPQ-P, which was the same command that we ran. DNS at example.com, that's fine. All right. We now want to take systemctl and stop. Run the same NTPQ, and it tells us connection is refused. Once again, looks a lot like what's here in the guide. Now, from time to time, there's been discussions about how NTP could be spoofed. All right. And in some of the Oracle applications, most notably real application clusters, time is very, very critical between the nodes that are in the cluster. And so new in Linux 7 is this tool called cronny. All right. Going to make some of the same changes in that file. And so we want to find the server lines once again and note them out. So we want to add a line for DOM 0, all right, just like we did before. And then we want to change the original line here for allow and add to it 192.0.2.24 as opposed to 16. And so let's get out of insert. Let's open a line below. Okay, those lines are all noted out. We've added 192.0.2.1. And the next change is to find a line for allow and allow 192.0.2.24 as opposed to what's currently there. There's the allow line. Allow 192.0.2.24. All right. So escape :WQ. The cronny daemon is not running here on host 02, so we want to start it. And once again, I run some other command just to make sure everything's fine. And once again, I got back green telling me that it is active and running. That's not right. That's not right. That must have meant I screwed up somewhere in my editing. Let's go do this again. SCRVER 192.0.2.1 allow 192.0.2/24. What I have done is I paused the recording to give Cronny a chance to synchronize. All right. And it took probably, 4, maybe 5 minutes. And so here above the box, it says, this may take a few minutes to synchronize. And it does, 4 or 5. And so if you don't get the immediate response like I didn't, patient young Skywalker, all right, it'll be there in a moment. And so now notice we do have the 192.0.2.1 dns.example.com and all of the details associated with the synchronization. We just had to be patient. That's all. And notice that the cronny sources looks a little bit like the NTP-Q-P to print. All right. And so that was this sources. And now there's a source stat. Oh, how about a plural on that? Stats. All right. Gives us some detail, tells us about what the results are. And to the stats command, there is a verbose option. And once again, you get a lot more detail. Okay. So we want to disable cronny, so we'll do a stop. We never enabled it. So we're not really going to disable it, we're just going to stop it. Okay. And then cronny tracking would return, can't talk to daemon. And because in the next practice we're going to use a different system, we're going to do a power off for host 02. Yeah. There we go. Now notice also that it put me back to Dome 0. So I now have two windows on Dome 0. If I continue with the one that I've been using, as expected, host 02 went away. So thank you for your attention. And once again, be patient while you wait for the cronny command to return results from tracking.